Nobody in that glittering room saw the little girl. Nobody except the man paid to clean up after them. No one to her left, no one to her right. Just a child with honey blonde braids and gray eyes, legs swinging 3 inches above the floor, counting the lights on the chandelier. Because it was something to do, because there was nothing else. The rest of the room had simply forgotten she was there. 60 people in their best December clothes, champagne flutes catching the light, voices layered over voices. Wonderful quarter, you look stunning. The London numbers came in strong. And not one of them looked down long enough to notice the child at the end of the table. Not even for a second. This was the Lang Financial Christmas Party, 42nd floor, Manhattan. The kind of room where the flower arrangements cost more than a car payment, and everyone in it knew exactly how much everything cost. The little girl's name was Nora Lang, 8 years old, daughter of the CEO. She had profound hearing loss. Diagnosed at 4, right in the middle of the year. Her mother had expanded the company into 3 new international markets. Since then, Nora had been raised by a careful rotation of nannies. Enrolled in the best schools money could reach. Given everything a child might need. Everything except the one thing she actually wanted. Someone to talk to. Someone who could talk back. There is a particular kind of loneliness that only children know. Not the loneliness of being left behind. The loneliness of being present and invisible at the same time. Of sitting in a loud room and feeling the vibration of laughter in the floor beneath your feet. Knowing everyone around you is sharing something you cannot reach. Nora had been living inside that loneliness for 4 years. She had learned to make herself small inside it. Neat, undemanding, easy to overlook. Tonight she was doing what she always did. Waiting, watching, counting the lights. A serving tray hit the floor somewhere across the room. A crash loud enough to make 3 people flinch. One woman spilled her champagne. 2 men turned their heads. Nora didn't blink. Isaiah Reed noticed that. He was pushing a mop bucket along the far wall, collar slightly crooked. Brown hair, the kind of messy that happens when you leave the house before the sun does. 38 years old, tall and lean, with the quiet posture of a man who has learned to take up less space in rooms that weren't built for him. He had been working this event for 3 hours. He had watched guests step around Nora the way you step around a potted plant, automatically, without thought, without guilt. He set the mop aside. He crossed the room without hurry, crouched down to her eye level. His knees popped. He didn't expect that. She noticed it anyway. Her chin dipped, almost a smile, not quite. He raised one hand, easy, unhurried. Signed, hello. Nora went very still. Her eyes moved from his hand to his face, measuring him, the way children measure things when they've been disappointed before and aren't sure they can afford to be disappointed again. Slow and serious, taking her time. Then, slowly, like a window opening after a long winter, she smiled, all the way up to her eyes. Across the room, a woman in a black sheath dress lowered her champagne glass. Genevieve Lang, CEO. Cover story. The woman who had closed a Frankfurt deal on 4 hours of sleep last Tuesday. She stood completely motionless, watching her daughter's face. She had never seen that smile before. Not once. Not like that. Isaiah had no idea. He was just a janitor who had noticed a child sitting alone. He thought nothing complicated about it. Just, a child shouldn't be alone at a party. He had no way of knowing he had just changed 3 lives. With the simplest word in any language. What would you do if that child were yours? His name was Isaiah Reed. He told her with his hands. Nora signed back immediately, faster than he expected, her small fingers spelling out her name like she'd been waiting all evening for someone who could actually keep up. Isaiah laughed, out loud, a real laugh, the surprised kind. A few heads turned briefly. Rooms like this returned to themselves quickly. Nobody came over. He told her he had a son, 9 years old, name of Caleb, also deaf. He'd been learning sign language since Caleb was 3, sitting cross-legged on their apartment floor with library books, instructional DVDs from the public library on Flatbush, and their neighbor Mrs. Okonkwo, who had a deaf sister in Cleveland and was generous with her evenings. He still mixed up a few signs here and there. Caleb thought that was one of the funniest things about his father. Nora signed, "Is he fast?" Isaiah considered it honestly, medium fast, like a microwave, not a race car. She pressed her lips together, failed to keep a straight face, laughed anyway. The sound, soft and a little startled, like she'd forgotten she could. Genevieve materialized at Isaiah's shoulder the way executives do, suddenly, without footsteps. She looked at her daughter's face first, then at Isaiah, then at her daughter's face again. She introduced herself. Her voice was controlled. Her eyes were not. Isaiah introduced himself in return. Janitor, holiday event staff, Brooklyn, single dad. He offered his hand. She shook it. Neither of them acknowledged the distance between their worlds. The kind of distance that swallows conversations whole if you let it get a word in. Nora had already moved on, signing at Isaiah with the focused energy of a child who has found the one adult worth talking to. She had a full list of critical questions. Did Caleb like dogs? Had he been to Coney Island? Did he think the signs for butterfly and flower looked too similar? Isaiah translated for Genevieve, glancing back over his shoulder. She stood slightly behind them, champagne glass hanging forgotten from 2 fingers, watching Nora the way you watch something you've been trying to find for a very long time. 3 days later, she texted him, formal at first, the way you write a memo when you're more comfortable with contracts than conversations. Isaiah read it at his kitchen counter over his second cup of coffee, Caleb still asleep down the hall. He typed back, "Sure, there's a park near the library with decent benches." They met the following Saturday. Gray December sky. Caleb came in his winter coat with the broken zipper Isaiah kept meaning to fix. Nora arrived in a coat that probably cost more than Isaiah's rent. Her nanny waiting at a tactful distance. The kids found each other in about 45 seconds. Within 2 minutes, they were laughing at each other's signing the way you laugh at an accent you've never heard before. Caleb's ASL had a Brooklyn looseness to it, a kind of full shoulder shrug built into every other sign. Nora's was precise and structured, shaped by professional instruction rather than a parent learning alongside her. They found this mutually hilarious. They invented 3 new signs for "You're doing that wrong" before the first half hour was up. Isaiah watched them and felt something loosen in his chest. Good and quiet, like a window latch that finally gives. Genevieve watched them and said almost nothing. She kept her coffee cup in both hands, stood at a slight distance, observing her daughter with an expression that was difficult to read, though anyone who has ever felt like a guest in their own child's life might have recognized it. Then came a Tuesday night that changed things. Neither adult knew about it until later. The kids had exchanged tablet contacts and started video chatting the way children do. Immediately, without ceremony, as though it had always been the plan. That particular evening, Caleb said what he was thinking without understanding the weight of it. He signed through the screen. "My mom worries about me all the time, but your dad smiles at you like everything's already okay." Nora's hands went still in her lap. Across town, Genevieve had been walking past Nora's open door when she caught the glow of the tablet screen. She stopped in the hallway. She did not go in. She watched her daughter's face go quiet, then recover, then signed something gentle back to Caleb before ending the call. Nora set the tablet on her nightstand and stared at the ceiling for a long while. Genevieve went to her office, sat down, did not open her laptop. She called Isaiah the next morning. Her voice was measured, thin at the edges. She said, "I've tried for 3 years. I don't understand what I'm doing wrong." There was something she didn't say out loud, something she had never said to anyone, not her board, not her therapist, not the nanny she trusted most. She was afraid, not of failing the company, not of the London board or the Frankfurt numbers. She was afraid she had already missed the window. That there is a season in a child's life when they decide, quietly and without announcement, who their people are. That Nora had already decided, and she was not in that circle. She had carried that fear alone for 3 years. It had the particular weight of things you hold by yourself for too long. Isaiah was quiet for a moment. Then, "It's not about doing the right things. It's about being there, slowly, regularly, without a reason. Not the kind of time you can schedule." She started texting him at night after that. Small things at first. "How do you sign good night?" Then longer, more honest messages. Arriving after 10 p.m. when her apartment was quiet, in the way that isn't restful. He answered every one. And Nora began to change. She started teaching her mother new signs at the breakfast table, correcting her with the pure delight children take in being the expert for once. Genevieve made deliberate mistakes just to hear the laughter. She had never done anything deliberately wrong in her professional life. It felt strange. It felt like something worth practicing. Then one evening, Genevieve tried to sign "I love you" and got the hand shape completely backward. It came out resembling something closer to "I want a sandwich." Nora slid off her kitchen stool laughing. She pulled up a video call to show Isaiah, narrating the whole disaster in sign detail with enormous theatrical energy. Isaiah laughed on the screen. Genevieve stood in her own kitchen with wet eyes and a smile that felt unfamiliar, like a coat she hadn't worn in years, but that still fit. Nora ran to the tablet screen, not to her mother. Genevieve felt it the way you feel a step that isn't there in the dark, a small, sharp drop. Isaiah told her the following day, gently, "Look into her eyes when you sign, not at your hands, not at the door. Her eyes, like the sign itself, is just an excuse to look at her." He was right, so plainly, simply right. He had a way of saying the obvious thing as if it had always been obvious, which made it land harder, not softer. Sometimes the smallest kindness is the strongest force, and you never know how far it has already traveled. The call came on a Wednesday morning, 6 weeks after the Christmas party. London, a bored situation that could not wait. Genevieve stood at her kitchen counter in her bathrobe. She had been cutting Nora's apple into the little half-moon slices her daughter liked. Something she had started doing herself after Isaiah mentioned, offhandedly, that it was the kind of thing Nora would remember. Her assistant's voice on the phone had that specific tightness that meant she had 40 minutes before something became irreversible. She looked at the apple slices on the cutting board. Then she called Isaiah. He answered on the second ring, already at work, his supply cart making its familiar squeak in the background. She explained quickly. He said, "Don't worry, I've got her." She exhaled. Then she said something that cost her a little. "Thank you, I mean it." "I know you do," he said, and hung up. Because that was Isaiah. No extra words, no ceremony, just the thing itself. Nora arrived at his apartment that evening with her rolling backpack and an expression of barely contained excitement, like someone who had just been told they were spending the week at their favorite place in the world, which, it turned out, was exactly the situation. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, a galley kitchen, sneakers on the floor in places they weren't supposed to be, a string of Christmas lights still pinned above the window because Caleb had asked to keep them up, and Isaiah had never found a good reason to say no. The couch cushion needed restuffing. The radiator knocked at 9 every night, like a polite neighbor reminding you it was still winter. Nora thought it was wonderful. She and Caleb fell into easy rhythm within hours, a private shorthand of signs and expressions and small gestures they invented together, the way siblings do, the way children build a language between themselves that adults are only partially invited to read. She helped with the dishes without being asked. She folded her blanket each morning with the careful seriousness of a child who wants to be a good guest. She sat beside Caleb at the kitchen table doing homework and occasionally reached over to point out something he'd gotten wrong. He accepted this with remarkable grace. Isaiah sent Genevieve videos every evening, Nora eating cereal, the kids playing a card game with rules they appeared to be inventing in real time. Nora asleep on the couch with a book open across her chest, face completely at rest. Genevieve watched them from a hotel room in London, the city lit up below her. She watched them the way you watch something precious from a distance, aware of the distance, unable to close it. The flight home was delayed. 2 days. A storm system over the Atlantic that had no interest in anyone's schedule. She landed Sunday evening, took a car directly from the airport, coat still on, suitcase still in the trunk at the curb. Stood outside Isaiah's apartment door and listened. Laughter. Caleb's first. Bright and a little honking. The laugh of a kid who uses his whole body. Then Nora's underneath it, pure and unguarded. Then Nora's voice, spoken aloud, the way she spoke when she was comfortable enough not to worry about being perfectly understood. I like it here more. Isaiah's voice easy. Yeah? Why's that? Because there's laughter here, Nora said. Genevieve set her hand flat against the door. She stood there for a long time, longer than she would have admitted to anyone. She thought about her apartment, the professional kitchen that looked like a showroom, the rooms that were always clean because someone came to clean them, the sound of the place after 8 p.m., that specific quiet that has nothing peaceful in it. She almost walked away. The thought arrived fully formed. She has everything she needs. You were never going to be the one who... The door opened. Isaiah stood in the frame, flannel shirt, sock feet, dish towel over one shoulder. He looked at her face the way he always looked at faces, with full attention, no performance. He didn't say anything for a beat. Then he stepped back. Come in. She walked into the most imperfect room she had entered in years and felt immediately, inexplicably at home. Nora saw her from across the room, went still for 1 second, that same measuring look she had given Isaiah at the Christmas party. Then she crossed the floor and pressed her face into Genevieve's coat, hard, the way children hold on when they've missed you more than they planned to. Genevieve knelt on the floor in her good coat and held her daughter and didn't say anything at all. Caleb stood by the couch with his hands in his pockets, giving them the moment. Warm and patient in the way of a child who has learned that some things are private and you just keep still for them. When Nora finally pulled back, she looked at her mother and signed, carefully and honestly. I'm really happy here, but I miss you too. Both things at the same time. Genevieve looked over her daughter's head at Isaiah. He said quietly, You're not losing her, we're just sharing her. Not a comfort exactly, something more solid than that. A fact stated simply by a man who believed it. Genevieve nodded once, swallowed. Okay, she said. One word, barely a sentence, but anyone who has ever stood at the edge of something they desperately wanted and been afraid to step toward it, they would understand exactly what it took her to say it. She stayed for dinner. Caleb made grilled cheese because he said it was the only thing he could do without supervision. It was slightly burned on one side. Everyone ate it. Sometimes the person you needed most was standing in a room you walked past 100 times before you finally walked in. The call came on a Wednesday morning, 6 weeks after the Sunday at the doorway. Isaiah was resealing a baseboard in the corridor outside Conference Room B when he heard the particular kind of quiet that means something has gone badly wrong. Not silence, something thinner than silence. The sound of 60 people holding their breath at the same time. He straightened up slowly. Through the long glass panel beside the door, he could see the room. Full house, big table, projection screen showing a graph with a lot of numbers on it. And at the far end of the table, separated from the rest by a careful arrangement of empty space, sat a man he had not seen before. 70 years old, silver hair, a jacket with the patient, precise tailoring of someone who has been dressing for boardrooms his entire life. His hands were folded on the table. His face was composed. His eyes were moving between the Lang financial team with an expression that was beginning, slowly but unmistakably, to harden. His name was Mr. Hayashi. His firm was a fourth-generation investment house. He was profoundly deaf. His interpreter, the one Genevieve's team had arranged 2 weeks in advance, had been in a car accident on the FDR that morning. The backup interpreter had a family emergency. There was no one in the 40-person team in that room who knew more than a handful of signs. A $50 million contract sat in the center of the table. Isaiah could see Genevieve at the head of the room, on her phone, voice very low, back half turned to the table, her director of communications whispering beside her. The estimated arrival time of an emergency video interpreter service, 40 minutes, maybe 45. Mr. Hayashi had already looked at his watch once. Isaiah looked at the glass panel, then at the door handle, then at his hands. He had not planned anything. There was no moment of deliberation, no internal speech, no particular sense of courage. It was simpler than that. He just thought, I can help. And then he knocked. Later, much later, on a Sunday evening in March when the kids were asleep and the apartment was quiet, Genevieve would ask him what it felt like, walking into that room. He thought about it for a long moment, the way he thought about things that mattered. Then he said, it felt like the park bench, like the Christmas party, like every time I've ever just stopped and paid attention to something everyone else was walking past. It never feels like courage. It just feels like, what else would you do? She looked at him for a long time after that. She didn't say anything. She reached over and put her hand over his on the table. Left it there. That was answer enough. Every head in the room turned. 60 people looked at the man in the maintenance uniform, tube of caulk in his left hand. Genevieve's face moved through several expressions in quick succession. Surprise, recognition, something careful she pulled back over the top of both. She crossed the room in 4 strides. Voice low. Isaiah, you don't need to. I've got it, he said. The same 4 words he had used on a Wednesday morning when she was standing in her kitchen with an apple and a phone call from London. She heard them the same way now. She stepped aside. He walked to the head of the table. He set the caulk down on the credenza because there was nowhere else to put it, and it seemed wrong to hold it during a $50 million introduction. He faced Mr. Hayashi directly. Signed, clear and unhurried. My name is Isaiah Reed. I apologize for the confusion. I'm here if you'd like to continue. Mr. Hayashi studied him the way a man studies someone when he's reading hands instead of a face. Precise attention, no particular rush. Then he signed back. Fluent, quick. A regional style with its own particular rhythm and idiom that was different enough from what Isaiah knew to require full concentration. Isaiah leaned in, caught it, held it. He translated. What followed was 50 minutes of careful, consequential work. Contract terms, revenue structure, liability schedules, a very specific question, asked 3 times in slightly different phrasing about the currency hedging provisions for the 2nd year of the agreement. Isaiah rendered every word, every nuance, every slight modulation in Mr. Hayashi's meaning. Not simplifying, not guessing, not bridging gaps with approximations, just listening and speaking and keeping himself exactly in the middle of it. He made one mistake, a technical term he didn't have a sign for. He paused, was honest about it, asked Mr. Hayashi how he preferred to handle it. Mr. Hayashi signed a respectable workaround, and they continued. At the end, Mr. Hayashi signed something brief and direct to Isaiah alone, not for translation, clearly personal. Then he smiled, reached for the pen, and signed the contract. The room held for one more second. Then it exhaled, all at once. The applause started uncertainly, the awkward, half-committed kind that happens when people aren't sure of the protocol, and also aren't sure they deserve to celebrate when they hadn't done anything. Then it picked up, because some things are simply too clear not to acknowledge. Isaiah stood at the head of the table, hands at his sides, didn't quite know where to look, which was the most honest thing anyone had done in that room in some time. Genevieve raised one hand. The room went quiet. She said, "Before we move to the reception, I want to take 1 minute." She looked at Isaiah. Her voice was steady, her eyes were not. 6 weeks ago, this man was working a Christmas party that no one had invited him to sit down at. He walked across the room and knelt beside my daughter, who was sitting alone in a crowd of people who were too busy to notice her, and he signed one word to her. She paused. "Hello." Nobody moved. That one word made my daughter laugh for the first time in longer than I can say. She stopped again, held it. Today, that same man heard a problem through a glass wall, walked into a room he had no reason to enter, and saved a relationship this company has spent 2 years building. She turned to face him fully. Not because I asked him to, because that is simply who he is. She signed. Imperfectly. One hand slightly wrong. Wrist not quite level, but unmistakably clear in meaning. You are the only man who made my daughter laugh. Today, you saved this company. Thank you. Then she knelt. On the polished conference room floor, in front of the board and the client and 300 collective years of corporate posture. She knelt and held his hands in both of hers. Isaiah looked down at her. His throat moved. His eyes were bright. He let her hold the moment for one beat, then two. Then he said, voice rough at the edges, "Get up, Ms. Lang. You're going to scuff your good coat." The room laughed. Real laughter. The warm, surprise kind that doesn't need to be organized, just released. Across the table, Mr. Hayashi watched all of this with an expression of quiet approval. Then he signed something, just to Isaiah, still not for the room. Later, in the corridor, Isaiah told Genevieve what it was. Mr. Hayashi had signed, "That man is worth more than the contract." Truth always finds its way to the front of the room. It just sometimes needs a little more time than we give it. Nothing snapped into place all at once. That would have been the wrong kind of story. What happened instead was slower, quieter, more true. The way real things change. Not in a single moment of revelation, but in the accumulation of ordinary Sundays that you only recognize later as the thing that saved you. The first Sunday dinner in January went badly in the best possible way. Genevieve brought a roast chicken and got the oven temperature wrong by 50 degrees. The apartment filled with smoke. Caleb, who noticed the haze first, signed urgently to his father that he believed the building might be on fire. Isaiah pulled the chicken out, opened every window, turned the exhaust fan on high, waved a dish towel at the smoke detector for what felt like a very long time. They ended up eating cereal at 10 o'clock at night. Cold January air coming through the cracked kitchen window. Nora laughed so hard she knocked over her orange juice. Isaiah grabbed paper towels. Caleb tried to help and knocked over his own cup. Genevieve stood in the middle of the small kitchen in her cashmere sweater, holding an empty carton, and laughed until her eyes watered. She had not laughed in a kitchen in years. It was a very good kitchen to start again in. The Sundays became a fact, not a plan, not a scheduled recurring item, a fact. The way certain things settle into the rhythm of your weeks without anyone making an official announcement. The way the neighbor's porch light is always on when you get home late. The way the church potluck always runs 20 minutes long. Some things simply take up residence in your life, and after a while, you can't clearly remember how the weeks worked without them. Nora began calling Isaiah's apartment her second home, with the casual authority of a child stating something obvious to adults who are slow to catch up. Isaiah quietly bought a second set of towels for the bathroom. Caleb cleared a shelf in his closet without being asked. Nobody made a speech. By February, Genevieve had started ASL lessons, not because anyone had suggested it, because she had a daughter who deserved a mother who could answer her in the language she moved through the world in. The tutor came 3 mornings a week. Within a month, Nora had begun correcting the tutor on her hand shapes. The tutor found this completely delightful. Isaiah said, "She's going to be a teacher someday." Genevieve said, "She already is." The conversation about the brownstone happened on a Tuesday afternoon in April. A real conversation, not a memo. Genevieve called him between meetings. She had found a place in Brooklyn, she said. Good neighborhood, decent backyard, 4 bedrooms. He was quiet for a moment. Just the background hum of the building around him. Jen. He had started calling her that sometime in February. It had required no discussion. "I don't need a big house," he said. "I just need the 4 of us together every Sunday." She didn't push it. She had been learning, slowly, not perfectly, with the same methodical patience she brought to quarterly earnings calls. She had been learning to hear what a person meant instead of only what could be solved. "Okay," she said. He heard what it cost her. He appreciated it. She did not tell him what she was planning next. That was not her style. Genevieve Lang did not discuss things before they were done. On a Thursday morning in late April, she stood before the Lang Financial Board of Directors without notes and said the following. "I'm establishing a new consulting position within the company. The role will lead our accessibility initiative for deaf and hard of hearing clients, including staff ASL training, client communication support, and liaison services across all departments. One board member asked who she had in mind for the role. She said, "His name is Isaiah Reed. Some of you may remember him from the holiday party." A brief pause. "He was on the cleaning staff. Simple, factual, the way you state a number. He was also the only person at that party who stopped to speak to my daughter. And 6 weeks ago, he walked into conference room B and saved a $50 million relationship in under an hour because he decided it was his business." She looked around the table. "I want this company to be the kind of place that doesn't overlook people like that." Starting now. Nobody objected. Isaiah received the offer from HR that afternoon while he was working on a third-floor corridor. He read the email 3 times. Salary, title, start date. He sat down on the edge of his utility cart and stared at the wall for a while. Not from disbelief, exactly. More like the feeling of something that has been a long time coming and still surprises you when it actually arrives. He thought about Caleb, about the years of library DVDs and apartment floor sign language lessons and school meetings, and the particular exhaustion of loving someone that completely, that constantly, with no one beside you to spell you for even an hour. He thought about how every one of those years had shaped his hands, made them patient, made them fluent, made them exactly the hands that had crossed a room toward a little girl no one else had noticed. He had never once thought of those hard years as preparation. But sitting on that utility cart in a third-floor corridor, he thought, maybe that's what they were. He texted Genevieve one line, "You didn't have to do this." She replied in under a minute, "I know. That's exactly why I did." He looked at that for a long time. Then he typed, "Sunday, all 4 of us." She wrote back, "Always." When you give without keeping score, without a plan, without any particular expectation, life has a way of returning it in forms you never thought to ask for. The second Christmas party at Lang Financial was different. The flowers were still expensive. The view from the 42nd floor was still the kind that makes you feel, for a moment, like you are suspended just above the ordinary world. But this year, when you looked across the room, there was a 9-year-old girl moving through it like she had always belonged there. Nora wore dark green velvet. Her braids were slightly uneven because she'd done them herself. She had signed at Genevieve that morning with great authority that they were perfect like that. She moved through the party with Caleb at her side, not trailing behind him, not being led, just walking beside him the way you walk beside someone you've chosen. Together, they worked the room in a way neither adult could have managed at their age. She would sign to a guest. He would interpret if the guest needed it. The guest would try a sign back. Nora would correct them, cheerfully, and the guest would try again. People crouched down, really talked to them. Not the polite, slightly uncomfortable hovering that adults do at children at parties. Actual conversation. The kind where you forget for a moment that there is an age difference at all. Caleb translated with his easy Brooklyn looseness. Nora occasionally looked at his hands and raised an eyebrow at his phrasing. He shrugged in a way that meant it worked, didn't it? Isaiah stood near the back of the room and watched. He was in a better suit tonight. The tailor near the office had done good work. He stood in the charcoal gray jacket with the easy posture of a man who has stopped apologizing for being in the room. He was thinking about things the way you think at the end of a long year, when the noise has settled, and you can finally hear yourself. He thought about Caleb, about the early years, the library books, the DVDs, the apartment floor, about the years that his dedication to his son had quietly cost him other things. How he had paid that cost willingly and without bitterness, and how, having paid it, he had become exactly the person who could walk across a Christmas party and kneel beside a child no one else had noticed. He thought, every hard year got me to that room, every single one. Not consolation, just the truth. Genevieve appeared beside him, sparkling water. She had made that change in the fall and no one had mentioned it, which was how she preferred things. She stood beside him watching the kids the way they had stood together at the park in December, shoulders almost touching, the kind of comfortable quiet that takes months to build. She said, She corrected the CFO's sign for quarterly earnings, and he thanked her. Isaiah said, "He should have. He was probably doing it wrong." She smiled, easy, immediate, the smile that had taken the whole of winter and spring and most of the summer to become natural on her face. They stood in the comfortable silence of two people who have shared enough ordinary Sundays to know they don't need to fill the space between them. Then Nora spotted them from across the room. Her face did something. It wasn't just recognition, wasn't just brightness. It was the particular look of a child who sees the people she loves standing in the same place at the same time, and feels in that instant that everything is exactly where it should be. She grabbed Caleb's sleeve. He looked. His face did the same thing. They crossed the room together. Nora took Isaiah's hand on one side, then reached up for Genevieve's on the other. Caleb, with great dignity, folded his hands around theirs to make it a circle. Isaiah looked at the four joined hands and felt something he hadn't felt since before the divorce, before the years of doing everything alone, before the long quiet stretch of being the only adult in a small apartment at the end of a hard day. He felt held, not by circumstance, not by obligation, by people who had chosen him, each of them, separately, in their own time, without being asked. He had walked into a Christmas party a year ago with a mop and a crooked collar. He had knelt beside a child no one was looking at. He had not done it for any reason except that it was plainly the right thing to do. And now, here he stood. Nora looked up and signed, large, confident, completely certain. Family is forever. Isaiah looked at Genevieve, then at the two kids. Then he signed back to all three of them, slowly and clearly. "Thank you for giving me one." Genevieve straightened, her chin held, her eyes did not. She signed back to him, both hands correct, wrist steady, the hand shape right this time in every way. "I love you." Not pizza, not a sandwich, not a mistake, the real thing. Said clearly in the language her daughter had taught her. Nora saw it and beamed. This story reminds us that the truest kindness doesn't weigh what it might get in return. It just kneels down, looks into someone's eyes, and says hello, in whatever language that person needs to hear. For every one of us who has felt invisible in a full room, for every child sitting alone at the end of a long table, legs swinging above the floor, for every person who has given something quietly and wondered whether it mattered. It mattered. It always mattered. You could be someone's Isaiah today, with just a moment of stopping when every instinct in a busy room says to keep walking. If this story touched your heart, carry it with you. A small act of kindness today can change an entire life, and more often than not, it quietly changes your own. This story was written by a human, supported by AI. It doesn't aim to change the whole world, just one small corner of your heart. To help you believe that amid all the hardship, there is still room for kindness, for unconditional goodness, and for the most beautiful things quietly existing, waiting for us to notice them.